Welcome back to the channel. This is Onikage. I have completed Bleach Rebirth of Souls. I have played the mission mode 1 star, 2 star. I'm about to play the 3-star missions. And the story missions took me about 10 hours to complete because I watched a lot of the cutscenes. So I feel qualified to give a review, having played the mission modes 1 star and 2 star right before playing the story mode. So I believe I've come to grips with all the characters and all the gameplay that's available. And I want to say, just as a preface, like and subscribe by the way, guys. I want to say, just as a preface, I like the fact that the game still had a hidden character at the end of the game. I won't say who it is for spoiler purposes, but I miss the good old days of fighting games where you could unlock characters as you go along. You don't just get all the characters as you go. The game actually encourages you to play and unlock characters. I don't like the fact that, even anime games nowadays, I don't use the word pretend, but they pretend to be fighting games where they believe that, you should just hop online and start playing the games as such characters. I believe that as a gamer, you should earn the right to play as certain characters. You can't just hop into the game and then day one you're playing as Aizen. No, I believe that as a gamer, games used to have those challenges where you have to unlock the better characters. If you think of games like Bloody Raw, you had to earn the right to play as Gado, the lion. You don't just wake up and start playing as Gado. So that's kind of the era I grew up with, where fighting games, you had to earn the right to play as certain characters. So that being said, I'm glad that they still hid a character. But of course, we'll get to some of the questions I have. But I have to start, of course, with the positives for this review. Overall, I like the game. I like the graphics. You can see Okura. You can see how faithfully he's recreated. You can see the stances that he takes. You can see the graphics. Graphics are fantastic. The backgrounds, they're a little bit drab sometimes, but other times you can see how good it looks. All that being said, it's clear that I like the graphics. It's clear the graphics are good. So when it comes then to how the game actually plays, I think the game plays quite well. I like the flow. There's a specific flow of battle. Triangle system, attacks, breakers, and guard. It's a good attempt, but I think it could have been fleshed out a bit more. I think that as good as it is, there is still room for improvement, and I'll get to that as well. So I like the physicality of the game. Like when you hit a character, you feel it. You can feel the hits, you can feel the impact, and each character has a unique animation when they do get hit. In fact, when I started the game, fighting against Gin, as you're seeing here, sometimes I wouldn't even be able to tell if I was hitting Gin or he was actually hitting me. Like, it's not a bad thing, but the way he took the hits was very, very unique. I think it's something that should be commended. Each character, the way they take hits, it looks like we saw how his hand was swinging. It actually looked like he was the one doing the hits, but it's fine. And of course, the score of the game. The music is on point. I don't know whether it's like mandatory, but Bleach always gets the music right. I've never been disappointed by Bleach music, whether it's in the movies, in the anime, and here in the game. I mean, the score, the original score of the game, it sounds like Final Fantasy at its best. And then obviously, as you're playing the game, the music changes depending on who awakens and who changes. So I like that flow of battle where the game actually keeps it authentic to Bleach battles, where you start in Shikai, you go into Bankai. If you have a higher stage, you go into that. And the game balances it at each stage. So if you are, maybe taking a hit, you've lost some Kompaku, your fighting spirit increases, and then you can activate your Bankai. And when you activate your Bankai, you are able to do more damage to your opponent's Kompaku. It's a way of balancing the game to make sure that each character is viable. Of course, there will always be more viable characters than others. So I think the game does a very good job of balancing. I think the game is fairly balanced. A good character like Okura, a lot of his moves take his reishi. So it's a little bit tough. Someone like Stark has to stay still to charge his zero attacks. Of course, we'll get to Stark later when we're talking about things that I didn't like. But overall, it's Bleach. The game, they even took their time to add some additional content. If you compare this to a game like Soul Resurrection, which came out in 2010-11, they didn't have that much additional content. It was just, fighting Mundo, fighting the real world, fighting the Soul Society, you're fighting Hollows, you're fighting Shinigamis, I guess. But the game, I think the game paid a lot of respect for World of Soul Society, explore the various locales, and I just think that the story mode, I think they added a lot of content, but yeah, I think they added a lot of content that, if you're a fan of the show, the anime, you would enjoy, like, because, Bleach has not always been about following Ichigo and the struggles, but getting a look behind Soul Society in the story I think, was quite good. It's a shame they didn't replicate that for Mundo, which would have been nice, but the bits in the story where you go behind the scenes in Soul Society, I thought were very good. So I think that the default movement is very slow. So the game starts you at a relatively wide distance to one another, and of course, depending on the character you're playing as, depending on the matchup, you want to create a bit of distance sometimes, or you're doing your combo and then the character gets sent back. So if the character gets sent back just by default of your offense, how does a character get back quickly into attacking distance? Because this game, one of the core tenets of the gameplay is distance. Distance is very important because you have quick attacks, you have flash attacks, and each of them have their own range. But flash attacks have more range than quick attacks. And I like the fact that the quick attacks, and even the flash attacks, they clash sometimes. So I think maybe my only problem is that you don't see those clashes often, because I don't think the game really, I don't think they focus too much on clashes, and I'll get to clashes a little bit later, especially when we're trying to compare other games. But the default movement is very, 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 very slow. When you're just moving without dashing, without teleporting, I think it's very slow. I believe that the default speed should have been increased, and the characters, they look like they're floating a bit. They don't look like, they're actually moving. They just look like the animation is just a little bit too floaty. It doesn't feel like it should. Of course, when the characters are in close combat, close distance, that speed, you can feel the game speed up a bit. But those dark moments where you're quite far from one another and you don't have bar to close the distance quickly, I think the game really slows down a little bit there. So if you want to compare a 3D fighting game, let's say like a Zone of the Enders. Let's look at Zone of the Enders, and you see how quickly a character is able to come in. Watch that again. See that quickly. So that moment where you start far from one another, and then that's less than a second. And then look at that. Look at the speed. You can go in, go out. Obviously, this is a different type of game, but if they're able to implement this type of speed, I think it would be really, really good. I think that it's we have the right to dare to dream, to expect this type of gameplay, I think. So that's basically the issue. My issue with the movement. Of course, I like the teleports. The dashing is fine, and you have dash attacks. But as I said, the attack buttons are not enough. So there's a dash, quick attack. Each character has a dash quick attack, but it would have been nice if there were dash quick attacks, dash flash attacks, even dash signature moves. Just ways to combine and implement the different forms of attack. A, either to close the distance, or B, to expand a character's repertoire, because it feels like characters are very limited. They have quick attacks, flash attack, signature move, but quick attack, dash attack, signature move, but that's basically it. So I think it would be nice if they can expand the moves list. I think the moves list is very limited. I understand that in today's world, you want your game to be as accessible to as many people as possible, but accessibility, I don't think accessibility is anything to be proud of. As I said in my previews for this game, for me, a Bleach game should be tag by default. I mean, obviously, the best ever anime game is a tag game. We must give our respect to Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm 4 as the best anime fighting game. It's just the best. But the best fighting game of all time is Marvel vs. Capcom 3, like Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and it's a tag game. The best fighting games are tag. And with Bleach, you have even baked into the story the idea of tagging to fight a great enemy. Against Aizen Sama, you had Yorichi, Ishin, and Kisuke Urahara teaming to fight Aizen. All three of them fighting at the same time, combining. That is what you want to see. Even against Halibel Sama, you had Toshiro, Lisa, and Hiyori tagging to fight her. Against Ion, you had like 4 or 5 vice captains tagging to fight that creature. Against Matsumoto, you had 3 fractions, Sonsun, Milarose, Apache, tagging to fight Matsumoto and Hinamori. So, same thing. Against Violent, you had Soifon and Omaeda. So, the examples are many. You had Stark too, you had, what's his name? Stark, you had, against Stark, you had Rose, Love, and Shunsui. I know they didn't fight together, but the point I'm making is that fighting in Bleach was not always one-on-one. So when they released this game as a purely one-on-one battle, I did not like it. I think that the game should be able to accommodate people who want to use multiple characters at once. If your game has 30, 35 characters, like this does, as a fan of Bleach, you want to be able to use as many characters at once as possible. So limiting it to just 1v1, I think is just not sufficient. So I made that criticism in the preview, so I wouldn't delve too much into it now. But I think it does hurt the amount of content in the game. I think that it hurts the number of permutations because yes, the game looks flashy, the game looks nice, but you can only do so much when it's just 1v1. If you had a tag, you could have combinations, you could have comebacks, you could have teamwork, and I think that gives your game a bit more depth. So my suggestion would be to add it as a mode, just to increase the longevity of the game. So I mean, tag very important. There's just no doubt about that. So I was playing through the story mode, and of course, spoiler alert to everybody. But my question was, this game is a game that is coming out to cover the Substitute Shinigami arc all the way up to the battle against Aizen. That's the Arrancar arc and the conclusion in Fake Karakura Town. If that is the case, the game has the opportunity to put things in that were not in the anime, for example, because obviously, most likely, most Bleach fans got into Bleach through the anime, then they went to the manga, then you had the games. That just appears to be a fair path for the average Bleach fan. But they made the same omissions in the anime, or in this game, as they did in the anime. And I found that very strange because, if you recall, in the manga, you had Jidambo, right? Jidambo, this is the guy Ichigo fights when you fight him in the game as well. When he's trying to break into the Soul Society, right? Now, when Aizen is escaping, 3 other guardians. Jidambo is the guardian of the West, right? He's this giant guy, giant of the West. But then you have the guardian of the East, the guardian of the North, and the guardian of the South. These guys were there. Why didn't they make this playable? Why didn't they make the fact that, what's her name? Where is she? Kukaku, Shiba Kukaku, is riding on his back and doing Kido moves and fighting them. I think if you had implemented this somehow into the game, into the story, I think it would have been really cool because it was an actual fight that went down. Yes, it was just one panel, but it gives you a little bit more depth if you had included this. So for them to skip that again in this game when they had the opportunity to implement it or to showcase it, I thought was a little bit strange. So that being said, other issues I had with the story mode is that the kind of the lesser known characters, or let's call them the support characters. I mean the support, the characters who support the support characters. People like what's his name, Aramaki, Makizo, guys like that. You just didn't see them. What you had was like some kind of default looking face, which I thought was a little bit sad. Like his face was just like a default face. Like this guy, like you could have implemented him somehow, but there were literally two other default faces in the entire Gote 13. Like each Shinigami that wasn't modeled was just two guys. I'll put them up in the video. But I thought that was a little bit lazy, and I don't like talking about budgets and time constraints because truly anybody who says those things has no actual idea of what's going on. But for me, that shouldn't be the case. I think each character that has lines should be modeled after the person who spoke those lines. I think, and the idea of having the same faces in 6 squad and 11 squad. I mean, the 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 manga and the anime did a particular job, and it was a plot point to show that different squads have different characteristics and different appearances. So the fact that the game completely ignores that, I think, was bad and detrimental to the story. Obviously, people who are not as invested won't care too much about that, but I do. Bleach is, this is a Bleach channel, so my eyes will pick up things like that for sure. So, the game also just magically for some reason, like you can see with Ikaku doing business, his like his gameplay is so fantastic because his rush down ability is just great. I love it because you see how his signature move is like a modifier that modifies the other attacks. It modifies his dash, modifies his flash attack, modifies his quick attack. And it's a shame that you don't have something like that for each character. So for me, Ikaku is really actually one of the top tiers because he is fun to play. It's just pure attack. And yes, of course, you want to diversify the play styles, but Ikaku is truly how this game ought to be. So if you imagine, yes, I know his weapon stinks, but if you imagine his attacks, just the speed and the versatility of his attacks, imagine that with somebody else and other people. I think you would have a very fantastic game if the attacks are slashing and clashing and hitting each other, and you're just battling for supremacy. I think it would be a really good thing. But then with Ikaku, you can compare and contrast someone like Hisagi, who just for no reason whatsoever just absolutely stinks. And I don't understand why he stinks so much. Hisagi, you start with him, he only takes one bar. He only takes one Kompaku, and I don't get it. There's just no reason why that is. It's not like he's OP or something. He's not. He's just weaker than everybody else for some reason. I don't understand that. Like with Chad, I found Chad also to be very useless, for lack of a better word. But at least with Chad, once I went into the lab and looked at him, I realized that he's actually one of the more powerful characters in the game, which kind of plays into the meme. But yeah, I think the game just selected some people to be useless for no reason, and I don't like that. And then one other thing that I didn't like in the presentation was the blood or lack thereof. Yes, the characters have some bruises here and there, but I think that blood is a very important part of Bleach, and there was a lot of censorship, of gore and blood and just general damage. And for me, as always, Bleach, the story of Bleach is also told through the injuries and the blood that the characters bleed, the injuries that the characters sustain. The fact that they took that out of the game for honestly no reason, I didn't like because it's an anime game. It looks colorful. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the 16 rating. There's just nothing wrong with the 16 rating. So it's a little bit unfortunate, but I wish that there was more blood. Another thing I didn't like was the cutscenes. The cutscenes, the story mode, didn't have the same consistency when you have the story being told. And a lot of these stories, when they're being told, if you animate them fully, properly, I think it would have been better because it's like they just used in-game animations rather than cutscene animations, if that makes sense. And there are parts where they use cutscene animations, and those parts are so fantastic. They are really, really good. Some of the best I've ever seen. But then you have the normal interactions where you see Byakuya and Kenpachi walking very strangely. Yeah, even Byakuya and and Renji in the beginning when they are walking in Soul Society, not in Soul Society, in the real world, when they're looking for Ichigo and Rukia, the walk was so, they looked like some kind of Yakuza henchmen, which is a little bit strange. Byakuya didn't have the stance and the gravitas that we expect from him. So just that alone, it takes you out of the immersion of the distinction between, say, a Byakuya and the Kenpachi, because you see the way they walk, they don't walk the way they ought to, and there's not enough distinction in their carriage, in their gait. Let's call it. But of course, but then you had Okura, whose hands were always in his pocket. So it was clear that they had the animations and they had the idea of the animations, but they did not implement them fully or throughout. So it seems like it's a theme with Bleach where they give one thing and they take away two or three, but it's what we've come to expect, I guess. Then Kepachi against Komamura, I need to look at that again because I think they repeated the same mistake of of the the anime, because usually it's supposed to be it was supposed to be it was supposed to form it was supposed to be closer to the manga. Okay, yes, I remember what happened. Now this is what happened. Kenpachi, no, Komamura, drew his sword, and his sword was supposed to cause devastation to the ground, but it didn't in the game. But Kenpachi still said the line. I hope that's how I remember it, but I think that actually happened. This is what you get when you buy the game. And I like it. It's a little bit neat. They arrange the characters according to their squad. So first squad, Captain Yamamoto, Soifong, Byakuya, Komamura, Shunsui, Toshiro, Kenpachi, Mayuri, Kira, Renji, Hisagi, Matsumoto, Ikaku, Rukia, Kaien. This is a very interesting choice. We'll discuss that in a bit. Shinji, Uryu, Chad, Ichigo Shikai, Ichigo Bankai, Yoruichi, Urahara, Nell, Zael, Grimjo, Okura, Grimjo, Neutral, Okura, Hannibal, Stark, Tosengin, Aizen. So as I said, when you complete the story mode, another character is unlocked, and that character will be here. But I won't tell you who the character is, just in case. But obviously, if you paid attention to the trailers, you will know who the character is. But whatever. Now, my main question is, why aren't all the Espadas playable? I would have loved to play as Baragan. I would have loved to play as Zomari. I would even have loved to play as Aroniro. But what I liked with how clever they were is that they gave Kaien his Espada costume, but obviously they didn't want to implement Gluttoneria, his Aranka release, because with the size of it, it would have been a little bit strange to implement it in the game. But then, just as I'm saying those words, you have Renji's Bankai and Komamura's Bankai, which are similar to Gluttoneria, because Komamura's Bankai is full armor. So when he's in his Bankai, he's impervious to hits, like he doesn't flinch. Same thing with Renji. Of course, once the Bankai runs out, they are in a stun state. So as I'm saying this now, calling it genius that they included Kaien instead of Aroniro, they could literally have done the same for Aroniro Arureri. They could have also done the same for Yami, because Yami could have close attacks and range attacks, the same way Kokujo Tengen Myo has close attacks and range attacks. So actually, you could even put Ion in the game. Of course, Ion, if you put Ion in the game, it has to be based on the fact that you have the Tresvestia playing. And that's kind of where the tag aspect comes in. As I mentioned in my preview, Shinji has a tag attack with Hiyori, where Hiyori dashes and does some attacks at the enemy, and he appears at the back of the enemy to follow up the attack. So I think that they understand that tag is possible, So it's a little bit off that they didn't include it, but I think that the size of the Espadas should not have been a problem. We saw Zomari in the story mode fighting against Byakuya, and they didn't even allow you to fight Zomari in his base form. And I don't like or understand that. Right? So, speaking of base form, Stark here, Stark here is not playable in his base form. Why? I don't understand why Stark is not playable in his base form. Because in Hit the Soul, Stark is available in his base form. Hit the Soul was a PSP game that came out how many years ago? Came out so long ago. Now we can just do a small comparison of Hit the Soul and Rebirth of Souls. So you have four here: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 24, 29, 32 characters. Right? 32 plus 1. Let's call it 34. Right? Now let's look at all the characters in Hit the Soul, just to show you how diverse it is. And it includes. So watch this. You have two Ichigos there, right? But watch this. You have Ichigo. That's two Ichigos. And when you select an Ichigo, you can select the form of the Ichigo. You can have Ichigo Bankai, Ichigo Substitute Shinigami, like that. You can even have Vastalord Ichigo if you want. So this Ichigo is literally 3-4 characters. But let's just look at the screen. So this is 5, or let's call this 9, right? This is 9 characters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 9 times 7 is 63 characters. 63 characters. And then you have this DLC here. Right? So, and also, yeah, actually, you have two Ishidas. So let's be fair, count that. You have Yachiru, which is so strange, so unnecessary. You have two Rukias, also strange, also unnecessary. And then you have, what's his name? Muramasa. You have Muramasa, you have Kusaka Sojiro, the other wielder of Hyorimaru, and you have this girl, her Zanpakuto's name is Miro Kumaru. Senna, I remember her from the movie. So you have 1, 2, 3 movie characters and an anime only character. This is how spoiled for choice we are. Oh yeah, we also have two Yamis. And this is Yami in his release state, and he basically takes up the entire screen the same way Komamura does, the same way Renji does in his Bankai. So here you have 64 characters on PSP around 2010, roughly. And I say 64 characters, but as I said, once you count 3 or 4 Ichigos here, you're up to 66. Once you count that, yeah, maybe 67. You get it. And the fact that you can transform, Baragan is playable. Look at Baragan here. All the Espadas are playable. Stark, Baragan, Halibel, Ukira, Neutra, Grimjo, Zomari, Zael, Aroniro, what's his bloody name? Yami. Nell is available in a child form and an adult form. You don't have to include the child form. Like, she doesn't need to be here, she doesn't need to be here. Even if you take these two characters out, let's call them joke characters. If you take them both out, you still have 63 characters. Ion is here. Lupi is here. Gantenbeine is here. Siruchi Thunderwitch is here. Dordoni, Alessandro, is here. Uryu's father is here. So even if you take these guys out, you're still about 60. You still have about 60 characters with all the Vizards, all of them, and you have Tessai. Tessai is here. So, and oh, okay, now I'm seeing some characters who just don't need to be in the game. But the point is that, and you have Yumichika here. You have Hinamori. As useless as Hinamori is, she makes the game. Nemu is in the game, a separate character. The point is that they actually took the time to show the care, to show the love. Orihime is playable. I don't know why people wanted her to be playable. For me, she doesn't need to be playable. So here we see that there's some characters who don't need to be here. But even if you take these characters out, you're still looking at minimum of 50 characters. 50 actual good, viable characters. And that is the difference between this game and this one. So there seems to be like a post-millennial, post-modern take on games. But to be fair, these characters are all viable. But I think if you compare this to being able to play as, let's say let's say Kensei, Kensei, right here, Kensei, Lisa, even Rose, even his what's his fucking name, Love, even Hiyori. When you think about it, if you add that, I think it's cool. I think it's okay. But you have that mindset of DLC and season pass, and we learned from Marvel's Capcom Infinite that if your game lands and it drops, and you believe that no matter what, you have the support. You may not have the support. You may not have the means or the time to actually add content to the game. So what do? You throw the content in first time. Oh yeah, I apologize. There's also two Uraharas, so that's a little bit weird. So as I said, it's still 50 characters if you take out all the fluff. Even when you take out all the fluff, it's still 50 characters with additional characters like Shuren from the movie. So I think it's a shame that Rebirth of Souls doesn't have all the Aranka, not all the Aranka, all the Espada, because Bargan is the king of the hollows. He should be playable. And it's so funny because one gripe I had was how they killed Bargan, and the game repeated it and didn't even provide a better explanation. All he said was that he gave it to him, and but actually no, the explanation was actually much better because he said Bargan said that his power is absolute. So it's like, okay, if your power is absolute, then it should also affect you. I thought that was cool. But the method and manner in which Hachigen introduced Briden's power to himself, I thought was a little bit weird. But there's no problem. It's fine. So speaking of His Majesty Briden Louis Mban, I like the fact that you could fight against Avira Mareda and the other guy. What was his name? Avirama was the bird, but who was the other guy? Who are Briden's faction? Why does this skip my mind? Okay, yeah. So you have, I think, Komamura does defeat him, kind of in a cutscene. I don't think you fight against him actually, but you had Gio Vega who actually fought a captain, and Soifon was there the entire time. And you don't fight. You don't fight Gio Vega. You don't fight Baragan in his base form. We want to fight in the base form. Byakuya also fought Zomari, but not in his base form. The base form of Zomari is actually what made the fight memorable. Not the fact that he has 50 eyes and the eyes control one aspect of the body, and that aspect is, and it's called love, amor, whatever. But the fight in the fight in base, Zumari base, is actually the highlight of the fight of Byakuya against the Seventh Espada. The fact that Byakuya had to use techniques that he didn't like to have used from Yorichi, and the fact that he had to use that technique to keep up with an Espada Sonido, I think is such an important thing that as a gamer, I would have loved to play, having watched the show, read the manga, and enjoyed what I read. I would have loved to experience it with my own hands, but the game did not give that to us. We had to watch that again. And that aspect is a very important thing that perhaps we'll talk about when we talk about characters like Aizen, Toshiro, Yorichi, Byakuya, who have the ability to have taken damage or taken a hit, but they have a technique that they use to nullify the damage that they took. So Aizen obviously has Kikasugetsu. When all the Shinigami were attacking him, they stabbed him. Toshiro stabbed him and thought that he killed him, but he broke the Kikasugetsu into somebody else. Byakuya was stabbed by Zomari. 5 clones, if you remember, 5 clones of Zomari, and it transpired that it was just the captain's Haori. Same thing with Toshiro. Toshiro was fighting against Halibel. Halibel released a Zanpakuto and divided it in half, but it was an ice clone. Those things are not in this game for some reason. Those things are very, very cool. And each character obviously should be able to have something like that. In the notes that I made, that I talked about in an earlier video, I talked about these things. I've forgotten what I called them, but it's like a reversal. In fact, perfect. The reversal system. If you can implement it in the reversal system, I think it would have been really cool. So if Aizen is getting hit and he activates his reversal, instead of just a burst of power, if it's defensive, it should be different from when it's offensive. It should be different from when it's neutral. The reversal system is very nice because, for example, if Shika Ichigo is in Bankai and he does a reversal, the mask comes out. Very clever, very very sensible. So if you have a reversal with Byakuya, you're getting hit. If he does the defensive reversal, it should he should lose his Haori. Byakuya will lose his Haori, and then he gets an advantage against the opponent. So same thing with even with Shunsui. Shunsui if he's doing his reversal in attack, he can throw his hat the same way he threw his hat at Stark. The same way, yeah, if it's the way he threw his hat at Stark, it should be the same way he activates his um, reverse gauge in attack. If Shunsui activates his reverse gauge in neutral, he throws his flower kimono or yukata, whatever, no, his flower kimono away. This is how to think about Bleach. In Bleach, you have to apply layers. You have to think outside the box, but within the story. Like, so that's kind of what I would have liked. So the fact that Ichigo activating his mask when he applies the reverse gauge means that they had the right idea. They had the right idea that when you activate a reverse gauge, something should happen, something should change. But again, that's difficult with Bleach. They did it, but they didn't do it all the way. They didn't think of ways to apply it to other people. For example, a very clever thing they did was giving Ichigo the ability to put his sword into potential. If you remember, he did that for the first time against Okura when he was fighting for at the beginning of the final time. But what was the effect in the manga when Ichigo applied that? When Ichigo applied that technique, right? Okura was being pushed back. So if Ichigo has that Zanpakuto coated in Getsuga, yes, you get the additional damage, but it should have the effect of pushing you back. But it's what I mean. They do it halfway. It's like that's been a theme of Bleach that I've noticed. I love Bleach, but we must be fair. They do. They always, not always, but they often half-ass stuff, and I don't like it. So that seems to have been a theme. You're keeping up with the theme of character transformations. So as I said, like, okay, perfect example. Halle Bell. This is not her correct costume. We all know what her real costume looks like. This under part shouldn't be here. If Nell has the ability to show under boob, so should Halle Bell. That's one. Shunsui activates the reverse gauge the way it should work. If Halle Bell activates her reverse gauge either in neutral or in attack, this should blast open. So in the anime or in the manga, she unzips it herself, but if you do it in the gameplay, it should just open by itself. So, but in this game, when you're selecting Halle Bell, you select either for her shirt to be open, for her shirt not to be open. There is no need. Include it in the gameplay. If you want to give her a different costume, give her some of the fancy Halle Bell costumes that she has had. Halle Bell has costumes that she's been doing in the manga. Well, this is all cosplay, but that's not what I mean. Like, let's see, Halle Bell Kubo drawing. Okay, let's try Google because we've seen Halle Bell dressed. Let's see, we've seen Halle Bell dressed in other fashions. Not this one. This is familiar to me, but that's from a different game. But if you look at some of the endings, you see Halle Bell dressed in a different costume. I'll find it. Anyway, so implement the costume changes in the gameplay. If the character is taking damage, like Ichigo does against Okura, let his costume show the damage. Don't make the damaged costumes a separate costume. Let's earn the damaged costume by fighting. Implement it in the gameplay. That's what you call depth. Same thing with Kenpachi. Kenpachi loses Haori. Kenpachi loses a lot of things when he fights. If he takes damage, it can go. It happened against. In fact, Kenpachi, very good. Kenpachi tore off his Shihakusho and his Haori together. He tore it against Neutra, I think, after the fight. So why doesn't he tear off or lose the the Haori when he's doing his reverse bursts in attack? That is how to implement costume changes into gameplay. I think that's such an easy no-brainer. I thought of it as I was speaking. Anyway, so we covered the fact that base stock is not there, and we covered how we could have implemented Q Kasugetsu for Aizen. As I said, a defensive burst for Aizen should be Q Kasugetsu. I think that works. Then, for some reason, I play as Soifon and she doesn't release as Zanpakuto, Nigeki Kisatsu. I'm not sure if it's in the game. I'll find out. I've not really tried to implement it. But one thing I can say that I would like to see more of is the destructible environments. Now, I like the fact that the ground does break. I like the fact that the location of the fights do change. But if you're on the ground and you fire a Benihime strike, or you fire a Getsuga Tensho on the ground, I think that the ground should show that you fired a Getsuga Tensho. Not just that the tiles broke, but you could see the line on the floor, a Tenken strike. I think that you can do these things. Let the environment also be part of the battle. Let it be part of the game. Let the environment take a character of its own. Let the environment participate in the battle. One key example I gave, even in the preview that I was doing, was Gin. When he does his Bankai, and you see that his sword has cut across 13 kilometers, right? The entire background of the game should be divided in half. From wherever it is cut. It shows, that was very nice. It shows that you are paying attention. It shows that the environment respects the fact that two captain class individuals are in Bankai, and the environment respects that fact and acknowledges it. I think it's a shame that you have a Bleach fight, a proper Bleach fight, where these astronomical powers are being used, and the environment doesn't acknowledge that fact. The environment doesn't bear witness to that. I think it's a little bit strange. So, another small thing I would have liked to see was the clashes. A clash does occur when you execute a kick-on move without the character being in the right state. But what I would like is if that clash occurs at other moments as well. I will give an example. Clashes are very, very fundamental to Bleach. And I hope I'll be able to get an example of a clash in a game, so you can see what it looks like in a game. But if you look at, let's see, if we have a clash. No, that's not a clash here. But let's look at this. There's a clash here. There's a clash that occurs here, and okay, watch this. See that? That's a clash. Watch again. I don't want to get copyrighted, but yeah, this is a clash. Things like this should be playable. I'll give another example of a clash. No. 報告します。軟禁中の死神代行、こちらに向かっている模様です。誰？お前になら全力で戦っても良さそうだ。Remember that? Now, this is a very good point. Kenpachi, when he opens his eye patch, when he removes his eye patch, he takes his sword and he slices something, right? That should be in the game. In this game, all he does is takes off the eye patch and he looks and smiles. That's not enough. He should take off the eye patch, take his sword and slice it the way he did. And the slice should be the same way Gin's was. Maybe not as far, but there should be some division somewhere. But watch this. This is about the clashes. Now, how come in a Bleach game, you can't do this? In Hit the Soul, you can. In Hit the Soul, you can. And I'll show you. But in a Bleach game, not every character can do this. So, let's say Stark does this, something like this, some variation of this. What's his name? Ikaku does some variation of this. But for me, every character should be able to do this. And not just when you're doing your Kikon move. Just this ability to stand here. Let's say, for example, both characters are in sublimation. Right? So, you have two characters in sublimation. Sublimation has ended. Let's see what that is. So, we're now in Spirit Drive. I want to see if I can get the perfect example. So, you have sublimation here, and let's say both characters are in Spirit Drive. Let's just say we're Spirit Drive. So, sublimation is over. Both characters are in Spirit Drive. Why can't, when both characters are in Spirit Drive, okay, when both characters are in Spirit Drive, why can't we do this? Just stand there and raise your reaction. Oh, this is so perfect. Watch this. This is so each character, like both characters have one Kompaku each. They're both in Spirit Drive. If they stand there and they flex their reaction, a clash like this occurs. Why can't we have this in a Bleach game? Speaking of clashes are not impossible. Do you remember there's a game called Injustice? There's a game called Injustice. And let me show you how the clash works. Clash. So, alright, let's watch this.
No, you can't beat me.
Never say never. Never say never.
Okay, now, this was very fast clash because this game is designed to be competitive, like an Evo type game. And you saw the clash was tied. And then they both picked the same thing. So if you have a clash scenario,
Never to you, Clark.
I mean, this nuclear like explosion. That is Bleach. That is what Bleach is. Let me show you. Let me show you. This is it. Right here. There's absolutely nothing wrong in this being in a Bleach game. Because when you think about it, this is how most Bleach fights end. Because it's a climax, it's the zenith of the battle. I'm going to put all my Reiatsu into this one attack. Can you take it? It was the same thing here with Ichinose. So you have this emotional moment. Look at how manic he looks. The clash. Kenpachi's being overwhelmed. You can mash or you can wager, but the emotion should be there. The game should be able to capture this emotion. Just watch this. We have to put some sound on this. And this effect should be in gameplay. It was in the cutscenes in the game, which I liked, but they should have recreated this a little bit more faithfully. And it should also have been implemented in the gameplay. This is it. This is what Bleach is about. This is quintessential Bleach right here. I mean, so then you can do anything you want with that. It's so good. It's so nice. So that's kind of how it's supposed to work. So there are ways to combine this. Let's next level.
Low on venom? You'll see.
The Bleach Clash is far more awesome. And as I said, let's say it's only possible when you have Spirit Drive. Your Spirit Drive bars are full, your fighting spirits are full in Spirit Drive. And then you just stand there and start raising your Raihatsu, the other person stands and start raising their Raihatsu, and then boom, the clash ensues. There is nothing that will be more perfect than that. And obviously, when you have a reverse gauge burst, as we saw, when, where is the reverse gauge burst? I think it was right here. So Rara is currently in supplication, and then he's about to activate his burst. Oh, I guess he didn't activate it. I need somebody who activated his burst. Oh, here we go. So now, when somebody activates their burst like that, I should be able to activate a counter burst, right? I should be able to activate a counter burst if I have the gauge, and then if the burst occurs in a similar time frame, or it's of a similar type, or it's it can't be of a similar type because they will both be defensive. But there should be a unique interaction for bursts that occur within the same range or within the same time frame. So you have space and time. So if a burst occurs within a space wherein they're able to touch one another, there should be an interaction, or there should be some kind of acknowledgement of that fact. If bursts occur at the same time, which should be a little bit contemporaneous in the first place, there should also be a typical response, or a unique response, I think. I give the example of Aizen, I give the example of Byakuya, I give the example of Yoriichi, I give the example of Toshiro. I think it would be so perfect. Oh my god, I just thought about it. That would have been so perfect. So, that said, we've talked about the environment. Now, let's talk about the character moves. For example, Yamaji, he actually fights Wonderwise. I like the fact that you get to fight Wonderwise in this game. This game has a lot of boss fights, and I'm happy. I'm happy with the boss fights. There are many boss fights, and like people you didn't expect to fight, you end up fighting like Wonderwise. So that was very, very good. But Yamaji doesn't have Ikotsu, doesn't have Sokotsu, he doesn't have Itokaso. And for me, I think it's a little bit strange that a move like Itokaso is not implemented in the game. If, for example, Itokaso is supposed to have 96, is supposed to be as a sacrifice. You should be able to sacrifice some of the Kompaku or some of your Reishi in order to do it. And because of how rigid the game is in the destruction of Kompaku, in the execution of Kikon moves, let's say, the fact that you have to deplete the person's Reishi, you cannot execute a defensive Kikon move. You can see how the system is limiting you, the player, in being able to execute certain things at certain times. And the system, as I said, it's a little bit rigid, and I already proposed ways we could have added more buttons. If you hold L2 to activate your burst or your Shunpo or your Raihatsu moves, you should be able to hold R2 even if you are not executing a Kikon move to add other moves to your arsenal. So you have more moves when you hold down the R2 button to do. I think it's a little bit better. Maybe those moves consume your gauge or something. There are all kinds of gauges in this game. So I think that ability to just have more moves implemented should be considered. People like Byakuya don't have what's it called? Cold case and symbols like Rakageyoshi. Byakuya, for example, his Senke is not playable. Why? Why isn't Senke playable?
Many people think Ichigo.
Let me show you Senki.
満開大グレー氷輪
Ready?
No, this is not what I'm looking for. Alright, so here we go. This is not what I'm looking for. Yeah.
総括陸上航路陸上航路総括速報陸
Look at this.
千本桜影よ刃の喉に飲まれて消える
Why not? Why not make a better version of that? Okay, let's see. Byakuya hit the soul 7 Senki.
Round 1 Ready Fight!
Look at that. I mean, look at that. Byakuya and Zomari are teaming up against Mayuri and Zael. Exactly. Exactly. You want to be able to create these combinations. What? He builds up his Reiatsu and he activates Senki. Once Senki is active, his Reiatsu reduces. Watch. Now he's using the sword. So he deactivated Senki. He missed the attack, but the fact is that he can activate Senki at any time. Byakuya, for me, obviously as my favorite character, I think is the best character in the game. Right? But the fact that he is so limited, the fact that his Kikon move of Senki, he just activates Senki and uses just the one sword to strike you down. It's like, there's no point. Why don't you just have Senki playable and then from Senki you can move into Hakuteiken? That's what I think that was supposed to be a counter. The point I want you to see is that the game, as limited as it looks, the game gives you more freedom. Freely, Kuchiki Byakuya can just activate Bakugo 61 freely just as a gameplay mechanic, but it seems like Rebirth of Souls relies a lot on cutscenes, where once you do a damaging attack, I forget what it's called, then Byakuya can now use Bakugo 61 to hold the guy in place. But here, you can do it anytime you want. That freedom you cannot buy. Or at least when you buy the game, you should buy that freedom as well with it.
Round 2 Ready
I mean, the gameplay is so funny. I don't know how they would have implemented this, but let's watch it to see if it's possible. Did you see that? Look at that. While Zomari is building up Reiatsu, Byakuya comes in to assist. Watch. Now, what does this remind you of? This should remind you of when Soifon is fighting Baragan, and she tells Omaida, her vice captain, because both of them are fighting at the same time, listen up Rebirth of Souls. She wants to activate her Bankai, so she tells Omaida, her vice captain, to buy her some time. That is what is happening here. See that? He's charging up his Reiatsu. The assistant comes with an assist. That is gameplay, that is strategy, that is depth. If you don't have depth in your game will not survive too long. The marketplace is flooded. I mean, in the previews, I called this game the best game of the year, but I've played it a lot and there's just not sufficient depth in the game for it to maintain that name I called it. But let's see. So what we see is that Omari is actually playable. You can refine the less attractive things about him. You can. You just have to try. So Rebirth of Souls says that let's see, season pass, characters. It says it has 4 additional characters. We don't know when they'll be out, but we've not heard anything. And that worries me because the game has been out for a month. The DLC included in season pass will be available by. That is so funny. Wow, is the game already on sale? Okay, no, the season pass is on sale. That is crazy. Anyway, so let's find a way to conclude this review. As I said, Toshiro Shadow should have more moves. I mean, Toshiro has so many moves. Let's see if we can find it. This Toshiro here. Toshiro has so many abilities. So just from this ice, Zanpakuto, Hyorimaru, Shikai, obviously, Tenso Jurin, that's in the game. Vacuum Ice Wall, that was the one he used in 1000-Year Blood War. Then he has Vacuum Ice Blade, he has the Ice Wall again, he has Rokui Hyoketsujin. This is like Sprenger, but with ice. Then he has he has so many moves. Zaho Ningyo, this was the doll, the ice thing that he used. As I said, he can do this as a reverse burst. The ice clone can fall to the ground and melt. There are just ways of doing these things. Ryu Senka, Senden Hero. Senden Hero is not in this game. The one he used against Luffy, it's not. Kyosen Hakaso is in the game. But Gojo Soraya is in the game, but it's not the same. Hyoru Senbi, I guess that's part of the combo. But he has so many things that he does. And a significant number of them were not implemented. It has to be said. So, honestly, I think I spent more time talking about the things I didn't like than the things that I liked. But, as Bleach's #1 fan, I probably have the most to say in terms of criticism, which I think is constructive. Especially my criticism of the reverse burst system. I think it shouldn't just be a burst of energy, it should be an actual set of animations that are unique to each character. I gave the example of Halibel opening her shirt or her shirt bursting open. There's nothing wrong with that. Shunsui throwing his cap the way he did at Stark. I talked about Shunsui throwing away his Haori the way he did when he was about to fight Stark for real. Kenpachi throwing away tearing his Shihakusho off or his Haori off. Byakuya, same thing, but with Utsusemi, Shihono-san. Same thing with Yorichi. It's like, that is such a small thing, but these small things, they all go a long way in making your game have what I call depth. Right. So one small peeve I have with this game is that Mayuri's Bankai, it activates the Bankai, a very horrifying Bankai, but it does nothing in the background. And I don't understand why. So you activate the Bankai. Well, the Bankai just goes away. What is the effect of the Bankai? Even if the Bankai affects the poison ability, saturates the place in poison. The fact that it's just there and it's not really forming part of the gameplay, unless you do a kick on move, I think that's bad. Because it's just there, a shadow just looming over the battlefield. I thought it was cool when I saw it. I was thinking there's some ways maybe the bankai can cross you up or something. The bankai can be implemented in the battle in some way. I just. So, I think with all that said, I think I've covered everything that I liked, everything I didn't like. To give the game a score, I would give it a solid 8 out of 10 because it sounds like I don't like the game a lot, but actually I do. A, because it's Bleach, but B, the things that are in the game, it's not always fair. It's not always fair to criticize a game for what it doesn't have. I think that's one thing that people do. It's like a negative. It's like a negative. How do I call it? It's like a negative way of looking at things. I don't like to criticize a game for what it doesn't have. I like to criticize what it does have and score the game on what is in the game, not what is not in the game. Because what is not in the game is not fair to judge a game by, right? So that's why no matter what I say is not in the game and what they should have added, everything that is in this game is good. The game is balanced. The game looks good. It plays well. My main criticism is that there's not enough depth in the gameplay because there's no tag. They're not like other modes because you just have story and mission mode, which is essentially the same thing of just fighting each other. So if it's just fighting each other, it's not enough to have a triangle system like Dead or Alive. You should also have tag. You should also have these smaller details where the background also plays a role. The background is a character. The background should show specific signs of destruction. So if Yamamoto is fighting, the place should be covered in fire. If Toshiro is fighting, the place should be snowing when the battle is over. If and such and such, if you are using power type fighters, the environment should be destroyed. I think that when you add that extra layer, when you make the background a character in the game, I think your game becomes more convincing that something actually happened here. Mayuri is a person who uses a lot of poison. Let's say the poison is corrosive. Let's say it corrodes the environment around him. I think that's also fine. It's just a way of respecting the fact that you acknowledge what the game is about and what you're trying to do for the fans in showing them that you actually cared and paid attention. I'll give another example. When Ulquiorra releases his Zanpakuto, when he awakens in this game, you see raindrops, black and green raindrops on the sky while the awakening is active. To my mind, or to my impression, that is the most impressive thing in this game. But as I said in the preview, they should have found a way to implement it with other characters. I will give you an example. With Byakuya, you should see the petals everywhere. With Ichigo, you should see the shadows everywhere. Ichigo's shadows, you should be able to see them. If you remember in the preview, I showed an example of Bleach Blade Battler's Second, where that was actually implemented. When Ichigo activates his Bankai, you actually see after images of Ichigo everywhere. I think it's impressive. I know it's not practical, and the truth is, it doesn't need to be practical. That's actually supposed to be the point. It doesn't have to be practical. Like Kenpachi, if Kenpachi releases his Zanpakuto, those skeletons that were holding a sword at Ichigo's neck, he like those. You should see those things on the screen. Mayuri, I guess when he does his, the place is covered in the poison, and that's fine. So by the time you start thinking about these things, even Aizen, if Aizen releases his Zanpakuto, you should see like cracked mirrors. It should look like you should see those slight cracks in like a mirror type thing, and I think it gives your game a little bit more depth. The game is good, but it doesn't have sufficient depth for me to give it a higher score, like a 9 or a 10. But what is in the game is very, very good, and I'll score it on that. That's why I'll give it an 8 over 10. Bleach is, very important to me, so maybe the score sounds a little bit biased, maybe. But as I said, what is in this game is good and it merits an 8. If you're scoring it less than an 8, it's because you are expecting things that are not in the game. But what is there is good, and I like to judge based on what is in the game, not what I think should be in the game. So, on that bombshell, thank you guys so much. I hope you're enjoying the game. I hope you enjoyed this review. It's a little bit long, but I have a lot to say because we've waited 14 years for this game. So, just as a bonus, we'll see what other tabs I opened to try to make this point that I'm making. So, Maki Toshiro. I've always said Aizen should have Kikasugetsu attacks. Always. He should always have it. One thing I liked about Zumari in Hit the Soul is the arrogance. He walks very slowly, almost as slowly as most characters do in Rebirth of Souls. But once you start playing him, you just feel the swag. It's just too unique. He's a unique character and he plays so well.
Round 1, ready, fight.
That's just too fucking cool, is it not? Did you see that? Did you see that? You had a guard and you had the counter guard. You had the just guard and you had the counter guard. Thank you very much. This game doesn't have a deep enough parry system. If you have a just guard, it should parry. Not just that you're just that happens a lot where you're so scared but you're both blocking at the same time. Because you know that once you get a hit, unless you have reverse, nothing is going to happen. The person's going to do whatever the hell they want. But if you add some layers to the defending and you get like a just guard, then you're truly implementing the triangle system where the blocking also has some level of skill to it where it can change a defense into an attack. That was perfect. That was perfect gameplay. Just imagine this with more technology and more, let's just say more swag.
Round 2, ready,
What is so bad about this? It's It's fantastic. I don't see anything wrong that something like this will be missing from the game. So this is Baragon gameplay. Let's look at how Baragon plays. And you see this? See this? This game is 2010. All these characters have to be unlocked. They have to be unlocked from playing through the story. That's how you make fighting games. You don't just get in and play whatever you want. You have to play the game to earn the right to play as these characters. That's how that works. So let's watch this. I mean, this is so cool. Oh yeah, yes, Baragon's voice in the story was changed. I noticed that the voice was not the same as in the anime. I didn't like the new voice. I didn't like it at all. But you know, it's whatever. And that's a very good question. Why don't they just, if it's the same script for the cutscenes, why don't you just lift the voices from the anime and just put them in? For me, that's what I would do. That's what they did in Soul Carnival and some of these other games. Just do the same thing. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to record the same lines all over again, having to get new actors. Just lift the lines, lift the old lines, and implement them.
Lady, fight!
So in Hit the Soul, you had light attacks and heavy attacks. Light attacks are usually more like Hakuda attacks, and then the heavy attacks are more of your Zan, out of the Zanken Soki. And then they had a jump button, so you could jump and do certain attacks in the air. So you have 2 attacks on ground, 2 attacks in the air, giving you 4 different types of attacks, which I think is more than what Rebirth of Souls has to offer. So he releases his Ankoto and still goes back to base. I guess there are ways to go around that for sure. Let's see what we had here. This was the final fight with Aizen in Soul Resurrection. So let's see how it looks.
落胆した。今の君からは制圧をなった掴んだ。君は進化に失敗した。私の与えた最後の機会を君は取りこぼした。アイゼン。
Interesting. I like that scream. I like that scream a lot. Now, this is one of my favorite scenes in Bleach movie history. You need to watch this.
黒崎一護が結界を破壊し、こちらに向かっている模様です。一護君は。
あの野郎。浮竹。
とにかく今は門の修復が大事だ。
わかった。黒崎は俺が。
So in the script I wrote, this scene. Listen, if you listen to this, listen to what Toshiro says.
黒崎は俺が。
修復が大事だ。
わかった。黒崎は俺が。
So here, Toshiro says he's going to fight or stop Ichigo, right? and then Ichigo shows up.
何の真似だ黒崎。敵を無知に包むのか。
I mean, so much swag on Ichigo there. So much, so much.
ならばなおさら行かせるわけにはいかない。もう一度君が暴走したら今度は
挽回。
I mean, the swag is just too much. But the point was that in this scene, this scene is supposed to be a playable scene where Toshiro has volunteered himself to fight Ichigo, and in the middle of the fight against Toshiro, Ukitake joins in. And if you remember, Ukitake's powers is the ability to absorb Reiatsu-based attacks and reflect it, alright? So Ichigo is firing a Getsuga Tensho at Toshiro, and Ukitake steps in and fires a Getsuga Tensho back. How cool is that? How cool is that? It was a shame they didn't fight in the movie, but they should have fought.
知れ千本桜戦闘
That's all we need to know.
やっと落ち
So that's what I mean. The ground should have some devastation to it.